Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be with you today and to be part of the association show. When I got the invitation to do this, I was like, heck yeah, sign me up. Let's do it. So I am really excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about community and how community fits into associations and where associations can find community within their normal day-to-day operations and the things that they're already doing. Sometimes seems like it's a little nebulous when you're thinking about community programs within associations, but it really isn't. Much of the things that you're doing today as part of your normal association operations are part of community building. It's just a matter of formalizing it if you're looking to have an online community program within your organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Before we get started, you're probably like, who is this lady and why is she talking to me about community? I am happy to provide you some information about that. As Katrina mentioned, I am the founder of Community by Association, which is an organization that is dedicated to the advancement of online community in associations and nonprofits, supporting those who are building those programs and responsible for the strategic direction of those programs. I am also the product manager of community at Project Management Institute. I've been working in associations for 14 plus years, managing online communities for 8 plus years. I love this work. It is one of the most fun things that I have ever done. And to help me get through the day, a good cup of coffee, a funny meme, and a great podcast are all things that help keep me going. So if you've got any recommendations around any of the three of those things, I am all yours. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know, hey, here's some things you might be interested in. So now that the boring stuff is out of the way, let's figure out and talk about what we're going to talk about today. So throughout this presentation, we're going to go through a couple of things. We're going to talk a little bit about how online communities fuel association missions, right? How does community fit into the way associations think about what their mission is and how do we translate that from a community standpoint? We're also going to look at some ways that you can start when building online community programs, right? Once we've set the stage for how online communities fuel missions, then how do you think about online community programs and getting started with those things? And then we're going to look at some key activities that you already might be doing within your association that can help kickstart those community programs or bolster some community programs that already might be in place. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things that I find fascinating about associations is the way that they talk about their membership, the way that they talk about their volunteers, their chapters, the way that they work holistically. So if you talk to association leaders, oftentimes you'll hear them say, we are community centered, we love our professional community if it happens to be a professional, happens to be a professional association. The words and the sentiment around how people come together within these spaces is very, very clear. The reason that associations exist is to bring people together around a common purpose, a shared profession, a shared cause. Associations are in and of themselves communities. And so it's very ingrained in the way that associations operate and the way that they talk about their cause and the things that are important to them. Community is very much a big piece of that. However, when we think about community programs within associations and lots of other organizations, sometimes we hit a wall. It's like, okay, so from a larger holistic standpoint, we understand the concept of community, but what do you mean when you say we need to build an online community program? What does that look like? What does that entail? What's the value that comes out of that? What do you mean bring people together in an online space? What are they supposed to do when they're there? All of these questions start to come up around what engagement looks like and how that helps move an association forward. And the thing of it is that it's not that far of a reach from the stuff that you're already doing. When you think about um, the larger mission and the larger programs within your organization, it's all centered around community. And we'll talk a little bit about how that comes together. So when you think about associations and communities, they exist for the same reason. Both form in order to bring people together, like I said, around a shared purpose, interest, or cause. And the activities that take place in each of these settings feed growth and engagement. And they play a major part in helping people form relationships and build trust. If you think about when people come together in an online space or in an event, or at a chapter meeting or at a volunteer meeting, they're building relationships, they're forming bonds. And so many times, what they're walking away from is not only the knowledge that they've obtained because of these gatherings, but the relationships that they've built and the trust that they begin to build with one another and with the organization around how it helps them throughout their journey. And so, but as I mentioned earlier, when it comes time to implement formal community programs within organizations, there's not always the clear view as to where to start. So, what I would love to do is take a look at where you already might see community forming and how you can utilize what you're already doing to support more formal online community programs to deliver value not only to the organization, but to the members as they're participating in those spaces. So first things first, you're probably thinking to yourself, if you don't have an online community program, where do I even start? How do I even think about community as a formal program within my association? And if you're perplexed about that, and how it currently shows up in your association, think about the ways people are already gathering. You are organizing events. You may have local chapters led by volunteers for more centralized engagement at the local level. You likely have an annual meeting or have volunteer insight groups. These are all forms of community in one way or another. And if you think about how you plan for these people to come together to accomplish a goal or a certain mission, and all of the pieces that come into that, and how integral it is to the success of your organization, you can start to put the pieces together as it comes, as it pertains to online community programs, right? It's the same way of thinking. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. So when you're thinking about building online community, whether you have an online community already and you need to revitalize it, or you have a thriving online community that just requires ongoing maintenance, or if you're thinking about starting something new, there are four key things that I think that you have to remember as you're continuing to build out what this could look like for your association. The first thing is build a strategy. This may seem like a no-brainer. You're probably thinking, Marjorie, who would start any sort of a program without a strategy in place? You would be surprised to find that many organizations, when they think about building online community, start with technology. They start with the platform on which this community will sit and then expect that once it launches, it will take off by itself. If you build it, they will come. That is not the case. Think about when you launched your membership program. That required a strategy, that required resources, that required funding, that required marketing efforts. Anything else within your organization that you are spinning up or that you are maintaining requires a strategy in order to ensure its growth. It's the same thing with online community. There are three key questions that you need to ask when you start to think of your community strategy or as you are maintaining your community strategy to ensure that it's still fulfilling the purpose that you set out for it to serve. First question is why? Why does this community need to exist and why now? Oftentimes we may jump into an initiative because it's the thing of the time, right? Lots of people are jumping into online community as a result of the pandemic. And so I always urge them to think a little bit more strategically about long term, once people start to come together, why does this community still need to exist and how are you going to make sure that you're able to support it? Second question is who? Who is meant to be in this community? So I would say that the answer to that question, just to give it all away right up front, is not everyone, right? The goal of a community is to serve a specific purpose. And then once you've gotten that purpose locked down, the people who need to be in that community need to be identified. So are they um, users of a specific product? Are they your event attendees? Are they your certification holders? Are they prospective certification holders? Who um, who is it that you are really looking to engage in that space? And so um, what you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that you identify that.
Outside of building a strategy, the next thing that you're going to want to think about is how to provide the appropriate resources for your online community program, right? So, one of the things that tends to happen is that online community programs are built, and then the thinking around sustaining them is lost. So these are not one and done instances of bringing people together, right? So the only way that these sorts of programs are going to be supported is if they have the right teams in place, if they have the right budgets in place, if they have executive support to continue to drive value, right? And so, again, as you're thinking about the different sorts of programs that your association offers, you're going to want to look at the same sort of support that you provide for those programs to ensure their success for your community program as well. Also, think about where your online community program connects to larger organizational goals. Oftentimes, what you see when you're building out your community strategy is that there are ties to other parts of your organization where you're delivering value that you can include community. So that could be events, right? If you think about holistically your events, people come together at an annual meeting and they are very energized at that meeting. They're meeting one another, they're making connections, they're sharing knowledge, great things are happening. And then when they go away, unless you are continuing to bring those same people together on an ongoing basis versus just annually, sometimes that magic gets lost. But what happens if you provide space in an online community for them to continue conversations, for them to start conversations before they even go to your in-person event, for them to start to get sneak peeks of content, for them to get energized about what's coming up for this event, and for them to share what they've learned long after that event has ended. That is how you continue to tie community into a larger organizational goals. And there are many different ways to do that based off of your why community needs to exist. So that's where you're going to see that value delivery. Given all of that, the last piece of advice that I have for you when it comes to building online community that I think is incredibly important is that you give it time. What you are dealing with when you are building an online community space is bringing people together to share knowledge, network, find a job, what have you, contribute. But because they are people that you're dealing with, right? Like this is not a product launch. This is me bringing people into a space. You have to give them time to feel safe in that space to ask a question, or feel safe in that space to feel like the answers that they're giving are valuable to the rest of the community. Give them time to warm up to the idea that they might want to contribute in a different way. Give them time to understand or feel like they um, can trust the organization with what they might share in that space, that it might not get back to their boss, that they run the risk of infringing upon, or they're able to provide their opinion in a way that is constructive and that's not going to make them feel attacked if it's a difference of opinion from someone else, right? So setting those norms and building that culture takes time. And yes, you're going to see new users, you're going to see, that uptick as your community continues to grow. You're going to see new connections made, but that real tangible stuff that helps you know that people are engaging and that they're finding value in your online community, that comes with time. If it's a new community, you could start to see that turn around in 6 to 8 months. If it's an older community that you're trying to revitalize, it could take a little less time. But holistically, you need to make sure that you're giving people time to acclimate to this new environment and understand that, hey, this is the place for me and this is where I'm going to come in and engage with this organization. So having all of that said, all great tips, build your strategy, provide resources, all that good stuff. If you hear nothing else that I say today, please, 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 please make sure that you hire a community manager. I cannot stress enough how important it is to hire a community manager, at least one, at the very least, to lead this work. Ideally, you have a team in place to manage the program, your online community program. Often we don't see the hidden work that goes into growing and nurturing online communities because these professionals make it look seamless, but it's not. They are doing moderation behind the scenes. They're welcoming people as they come into the online community. They're making sure questions are getting answered. They're responsible for ensuring there's content there in the community. Behind the scenes, they're doing some cross collaboration across the organization to provide value not only to members but to other parts of the organization. They're working with marketing, they're working with your content team. This is a full-time job. So if you're truly investing in community within your association, you must resource it like you would your member, chapter, or product programs. Expecting one person who already has a full-time job to take on another full-time job and do either well is setting them up for failure. It's setting them up for failure, and it's setting your respective programs up for failure. So at the very least, if you do nothing else when you're starting to really build out your online community program, hire a community manager. If you can't hire a community manager, think about bringing in a consultant to at least help you get started, and they can make some recommendations around things like ops models that will help you maintain your program going forward. Okay, so we've got strategy in place. We've hired a community manager. As you start to build your community, it's really important that you start to build your community with your members, not just for them, right? So feedback isn't just about figuring out what they need so that you create it, right? Think about when you and why you bring volunteers in. If you have a standard that you publish, you probably have input from a volunteer working group that helps you shape that standard, right? If you have a certification program, you probably ask volunteers to help you with item writing, right? They're the ones doing the work, so their input is important. It's no different when you're building community. Those who will engage in that space will be key to helping build out that experience and creating an exclusive and inclusive place for people to share ideas and have conversations. At the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be participating in that space and engaging in that space. It is important to understand what they expect to see, what type of content they expect to have, what type of experience they expect to have, how they expect to be able to make contributions in meaningful ways, and making sure that you're building with members really gives them ownership of that experience that they want to have with you there to facilitate that journey. And so as you're going through thinking about online community programs, there might you might find that there are some gaps, right? So you've done some user research, you've conducted some interviews, those types of things. So then what happens when you're not quite sure about some of the other things that you might want to uncover, like from a membership standpoint or from an event standpoint? So you're already probably collecting data on things like member satisfaction, event experience, etc. But that data is also good for understanding what members might want to see in a community experience. Some of those verbatims that you get in your surveys and other means of collecting data, voice of the customer analysis information, might actually provide you some key insights that help you build out your community program and your strategy and help you to create the experiences that folks are looking for. It's okay to collect more as you think about what your community program needs to look like, but don't be afraid to lean on what you know to understand where the gaps are and work to fill them through your normal methods of data collection to uncover ways to create dynamic programming and methods of engagement in an online space. And at the end of the day, community is really in a great position to meet members where they are. I am of the philosophy that community is in a position to support a full member journey. So it's not just about what happens when someone comes to the community. It's what happens when once they discover the community, but what happens when they're in there and they're engaging, right? So you're going to have people who are going to come in who immediately hit the ground running and they want to contribute. They want to help answer questions. They want to be your super users. You're also going to have people who come in who are looking for information. And is it just information that the community can answer, or is there a way that you can support their journey by connecting them to thought leadership or connecting them to additional organizational information or offerings that can help them as they are interacting within that space? Community doesn't require that you already be at a certain point in your journey in order to participate. All that it requires is a willingness to do so. And so community is a great way to meet members where they are, gives them a low lift to participation, and allows them to define what that looks like on their terms, not on the organization's terms. And that's incredibly valuable when people are looking for ways to contribute and get involved. And they may not necessarily want to be a volunteer. They may not necessarily want to join a chapter, but there's something that they want to do. Community provides the avenue to which that can happen. Okay, so things to remember. This doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be intentional. This is a lot of work. And if you do it well, when you do this work, it is incredibly rewarding, not just for the members of your association, but for your association holistically. So just remember, create a strategy, make sure you've got that who, why, and how nailed down. Lean on how you're currently bringing people together to really understand some ways that you can augment and create an online community program. Hire a community manager. Again, I will say it till I'm blue in the face. Please make sure that you hire at least a community manager and help them in the long run build out a team so that these community programs can be successful. Build with your community members, right? Give them the opportunity to have some input into how this all plays out for them. Use data that you already have in order to get some insights on things like event experiences and how you can fold those into your community experience. And meet members where they are. Again, this is not something that requires that they be anything more than who they are in order to interact, and it helps them define what that looks like for their journey. So I hope that this information has been incredibly helpful for you. I think we've got some time for questions, so I will go ahead and turn it over to Katrina to facilitate that.
Awesome. Ooh, there we go. Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Marjorie, for that. That was like so informative, and you definitely sparked a lot of conversation in the chat. I particularly like where you said, give it time. Community, even though it's such a hot topic right now, I think when I think about it, it's like, yeah, like time is so important. You can't if you're planting a seed to watch a flower grow, you don't expect that to happen overnight. In order to get a garden, you got to pay attention to that garden. You got to take care of it and then watch it grow slowly. So I thought that for me was like probably my biggest takeaway is that don't rush it. Give it time. But anyways, okay, so let's get into the Q&A because there's a few happening here and they're pretty good. So first question, you're in the hot seat, Marjorie, is do I need to incentivize my members to build a community? Do I need to bribe them?
So that is a great question. And the answer to that is no. If you have really identified and nailed down who your community is for, there's a couple of things that you can do to get people to participate. First things first, make sure that you identify your early adopters. There are already going to be people who are like, this is a great idea. This is the thing that we've been waiting for. How do I get involved? Those could be volunteers. Those could be people who you hear from on insight committees. Those could be people who've just been with the organization a long time and have provided input over the years around how they would like to engage. Find those people and get them engaged early. Let them be those who are providing prompts for conversation who are providing content, give them blog access, give them special perks within the community that don't necessarily have to be things like here's a gift card or here's another mug that you probably don't need that we've given you over the years, like whatever that looks like, but give them some sort of visibility within that online community that lends to their reputation there. Second thing that I would say is make sure that people know where to find it, right? Lots of times online communities don't grow because organizations don't do a good job of saying, we have a community here, and here's what you can do while you're there. Like it's hidden in some sort of weird drop down on your website, or you don't market it, you don't speak about it. So make sure that people know where it's at. And over time, people will start to come and they'll start to participate in the ways that make sense for them. So you don't necessarily need to incentivize, but give people who you think are going to be your champions the opportunity to be early adopters, and then make sure people can find your community.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. If you build it, they will come, but build it so they can see it.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, cool. Second question here is, if I have limited resources financially, what's the single first thing I should do that gives me the most bang for my buck?
The first thing that you should absolutely do if you're limited in resources financially is hire a community manager, right? Because if you hire a community manager, like if that is probably the only thing that you can do, then hire that community manager. And then what they can do is they can come in and figure out, how do we make this work until we get more resources? They can make the case and create a case for a budget and resourcing and everything that you need in order to go to your board and say, if this is going to work, this is what we need, right? Mm-hmm. They can help you strategize around what to get done, what needs to happen, how that needs to look, and make the business case for building community. So if there's nothing else that you can do at this point, hire a community manager, let them come in and do that work for you.
Right. Hire the professional so they can articulate why it's so beneficial to have that community space to begin with. Trust the professional.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Next question. Does my community manager need to be full-time? What if I can't afford one? Actually, this is like a part 2 to the other question we just had.
So ideally, your community manager would be full-time. If you can only hire a part-time community manager, and empower that community manager to then involve volunteers in the successful management of that community, right? So you can have volunteer moderators. You can have people who are volunteering to create content. If you can only hire someone part-time, ensure that that community manager is able to really kind of focus in on the strategic piece of it, and then utilize volunteers for the operational day-to-day stuff where you can.
Gotcha. Okay. Next question. Actually, just on that note too, when you're get that part-time community manager is looking for those volunteers, that's where those, like when you identify your early adopters or the people that are excited about this community space, I guess that's where they would definitely come in handy to support that community manager. That's awesome. Okay. Next question. How important is it for my communities to physically meet? Do we need physical meetings?
Not necessarily. That is going to be based off of why your community needs to exist, right? So that all goes back to your strategy. Your online community can remain online as long as there are other opportunities for them to meet face-to-face. So for instance, at PMI, our community is always online. We don't have separate programming for them to meet offline. However, if they want to meet at a chapter meeting, we have a mechanism in place within the platform that allows them to connect online with other chapter members in their area, so that when they go to a chapter meeting, they know who those folks are. At our annual meeting, we have a presence at our annual meeting that is specifically for community, so that the community who's been gathering together online for the past 12 months can come together and say hi to one another, meet the ambassadors, those types of things. So as long as there's opportunities, if that is important to community members, for them to come together in a live situation, that's fine. And if you don't necessarily need that, or they don't need that, then I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. It's not, I don't think it's necessary unless it is key to the ongoing value of your online community.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what you said about building it with your members. So if they want it, consider it.
Yeah.
If they're okay without it, then they're okay without it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Does my community manager need to be an expert in my association's subject matter?
No, that's stuff that they can learn, right? Like I am not a project manager, but I run a project management community. And I lean on the expertise of my community to understand what content is important, what's trending in the profession, and the rest of my organization to help me build programming around that, right? So you don't necessarily need to be a subject matter expert in the thing that you're building for, as long as you understand community. You can pick up that knowledge along the way, but they don't necessarily need to be, an industry expert in order to build community for that industry.
Okay, so it sounds like community managers need a little bit of trust in I guess the space that they're working in to trust the people that they're telling them what's up.
Yeah, and they'll pick that up over time, as they work there. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. All right, last question. What if your nonprofit association does not have a budget for a community manager?
volunteers are your best resource. Or if someone would be willing to take that on part-time, as long as you're augmenting their work, their full-time work, so that they can give the appropriate attention to the online community, I would say that was okay. But if that's not the case, then see what you can build out from a volunteer perspective. Or bring in an intern, bring in someone who is looking to gain some community management skills, and bring them in as a community management intern. And that will then allow you to still have someone solely dedicated to the community. But if you don't have the budget to pay them, then that's also another option.
Okay, awesome. That is all the questions we have. Not questions, they're a pretty good question, I'd like to say. Clive in the chat is saying, I'm going to put it on screen here. She's saying, hire a community manager, like Alec Baldwin says.
100%. Hire a community manager.
Awesome. Pro tip. Okay, well, thank you so much, Marjorie, for being with us today and, giving us your knowledge on this topic. Great presentation, great comments. I always know when it's a good presentation when the chat just starts going. And you definitely had that going today. So really, really appreciate your time with us today. And we'll see you next time.